So, the debate has been set forward, and I am never one to shy away from a good debate. So, starting today, I'm going to review teams that have won the Stanley Cup, their rosters, how they did, how they got there, and how much luck might have been involved, and just how many great players each team had. I intend to review each Stanley Cup winner from 1981 until 2017. So strap your boots on and let's go. New York Islanders in 1981 are a good place to start because that's the first Stanley Cup final I watched as a hockey fan. And this was a team built around Mike Bossy, Brian Trottier, Denny Potvin, Billy Smith. Clark Gillies was underrated. I don't think he was listed in the page I was reading, but I may have skipped over him because he wasn't up here, and then I was like, oh, right, Gillies. During the regular season, Bossy had 119 points. Brian Trottier had 103. Easy to forget if you're a Penguins fan and love Trottier's work in the early 90s, that in the early 80s, Trottier was one hell of an offensive forward as well. Clark Gillies, 78 points. Bob Bourne, 76. Denny Potvin, 76. Anders Kaller, 64, including 38 goals. So, that's a pretty decent offense. But what really gets me about this team, penalty minutes. Gillies, 99. So Gillies could beat you on the scoreboard or in a fight. Potvin, 104. Potvin was willing to drop the gloves as well. Nystrom, 145. You didn't mess with Bob Nystrom. Gary Howitt, 174. I believe the year after he was traded to New Jersey. A couple years later, maybe. Dave Langevin, 122. Gord Lane, 124. A lot of toughness on that Islanders team. And a lot of skill. And when you look at it, hat tricks for that season. Mike Bossy had 9 hat tricks in a season. Trottier had 2. Butch Goring had 2. Tinelli had 1. Keller had 1. Potvin had 1. Now, if you're going to get into guys who I think at least deserve being talked about for the Hall of Fame, John Tinelli. John Tinelli played a long time. And his point per game doesn't look great. But he was a major player for this team. Playoff scoring. Bossy had 35 points. That's in 18 games. Trottier, 29 points. Potvin, 25. Goring, 20. Wayne Merrick had 18. Wayne Merrick was one of those guys who in the playoffs would turn his game on. Him and Nystrom both were underrated offensively. And then here's Gillies with 15 points in 18 games. To go along with the 78 he had in a regular season that, of course, was 80 games long. Other notables in here. Tambellini's on the list from the regular season, but I believe he was traded away. That was the year he was traded away. Tinelli only had 52 points in 70 games, but his offensive game, I think he had a career year not too long after that. I really shouldn't be doing this because I'm kind of spoiling it for myself. Yeah, he had 52 points, and then the following season he had 93 points. He had 100 points for the Islanders in 84-85. He ended up with a total of 1,028 NHL games played and got 836 points. On today's hockey team, those numbers equal probably the Hall of Fame. Tinelli likely never gets in, but for me, he was one of the key cogs of the Islanders. Part of the reason that I decided to do this is because here was a team that could hurt you on the scoreboard, but on the blue line you had Lane and Langevin. You had McEwen, who had 14 points in 17 games in the playoffs, too, before being traded to the Colorado Rockies. Ouch. Ken Morrow was back there. Morrow was a part of Miracle on Ice in 1980. Morrow is an argument in favor of NHLers not going to the Olympics. Greatly helped Morrow being at that Olympics. Of course, Potvin was a huge offensive defenseman and a pretty tough guy. And Stefan Persson was really underrated as well. Person was one of my favorite Islanders. When I get to that favorite Islanders of all time video, expect Stefan Person there. And that's the thing. I can still name their top 6. I don't need to go look it up. I can still name their top 6. And it was a blue line that could really intimidate you. The Islanders did a little bit of everything. And this part of the reason I'm starting with the Islanders isn't just that was my first year watching hockey. It's that I've seen, and I think this has got to be some of the younger crowd that watch this channel, who've said, well, the Islanders weren't very good. Or, the Islanders, whatever. No, this team, if you took this team and you put them in a time machine and brought them to now, and you gave them access to all of the training equipment you have now, this team is just as capable of winning a Stanley Cup now as they were in the early 80s. It's an impressive lineup, and it is a tough lineup. Like, when you have 6 guys at 100 penalty minutes or more, I'll go ahead and give Clark Gillies that last penalty minute to get him to 100. That's an impressive team. And you had to be in the Patrick division back then. If your team wasn't able to fight, the Flyers wouldn't let you live to see the end of the game. This was still coming out of the Flyers' Broad Street Bullies era. And the Islanders were built to beat that, and they did. 1980, they beat the Flyers, but I wasn't watching back then. This is what I watched. They got there by beating the Maple Leafs in the first round in 3. It was a best of 5 in the first round back then. They beat Edmonton in 6 because this was Team 1 versus Team 16. This is that system that all hockey fans say, oh, it'll be great. It really isn't. And then in the third round, they swept the Rangers before they met Minnesota in the finals. They won 6-3 at home. 6-3 at home. They won 7-5 on the road. Minnesota avoided the sweep with a 4-2 win. And then the Islanders beat them handedly 5-1 in that final game to win it in 5. The Islanders were never threatened with elimination that year. The Islanders went on an incredible run. And in the next chapter, I will discuss the 1982 team. So again, it is, when you win a Stanley Cup, you have to have more than one part. Because, of course, we get into this discussion, and you can say, well, without Mike Bossy, they're nowhere. True, he was the number 1 regular season scorer and playoff scorer, but you still have a pretty damn good team without him. I don't know that they win a Stanley Cup. I don't know that they don't, because Billy Smith was also a pretty intimidating goaltender. He had 33 penalty minutes this season. He had more penalty minutes than other seasons, and I'll probably have him on this board at some point, just for the fact that he's a goaltender and he's getting penalty minutes. The fights between him and Tiger Williams, of course, were legendary. He was legendary as a fighter as it is, and I'll get into that more, not necessarily in the 82 video, probably in the 83, because that's where the Stanley Cup run ended for the Islanders. Let me know what you guys think. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And I've got as close to an Islanders 1980s jersey as I can get, except it's got this patch on it. If it didn't have this patch, it'd be damn close to being the exact same as the 80s Islanders. I may have hated the team back then because I cheered for underdogs, but I have to respect that lineup. That is a deadly lineup. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.